to say. I can hear y'all out in the car, another goddamn lightweight. Jesus,
When are we going to find
yeah,
somebody,
Jesus,
you
if
know?
we find, is there anything we can use?
Right. We're just looking for that one sage
Yeah,
voice.
boy, was that a waste of footage? God, Jesus, you know. And the son of a bitch never shut up.
Okay, got it.
How did you get involved in Louisiana politics?
I was starving to death, and I didn't have the courage to rob banks, and panhandling hadn't made its revival in the South, not since the Depression. And that's finally what it came down to. No, seriously, I had gone back to my hometown of Lafayette, Louisiana, and opened an advertising agency. This was in 1958, and was starving to death. And some small elections came along, police jury, mayor, school board. And it was an opportunity to make as much as $200 a month, which was glorious. And I began handling these campaigns, and that's how I got into it. I had a degree in journalism, had been in the service, typical. So along came these campaigns, and I became an authority, an expert, and a professional fabricator.
To an outsider, how would you describe Louisiana politics?
To an outsider, I would say have some fun.
Can I just get you one thing? When you start your answer, can you try to incorporate the question in the answer? So if he says Louisiana politics was like you say, Louisiana politics was.
All right,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
How would you describe, Louisiana politics? Why is Louisiana politics different?
How would I describe Louisiana politics to an outsider? Oh, I would tell the outsider to go ahead and relax and have some fun and laugh with us and try very hard not to laugh at us. But I would tell that person what you're witnessing, in fact, is a kind of low-key tragedy. And I strongly suspect that this state, which I love dearly, is the victim in the tragedy, who got killed off someplace early in the first act. And the rest of the play is a humorous funeral. Because whenever I think about Louisiana politics, I think about a title of a book that Alan Paxton wrote about South Africa called Cry the Beloved Country. I think that sums us up well. Here we are among the three wealthiest states in the nation. Our treasures beneath the earth and on the earth are monumental, from fur to salt to oil to great shrimping and oyster industries. Our people are good people, a love of life, a warmth, a compassion and humanity that the rest of the country could do well to emulate. So going into the poker game, we had it all. We had a hand with not 4 aces, but 5 aces. And somehow it didn't work out. Here, we find ourselves now virtually at the bottom or near the bottom of every list that has meaning in contemporary life. Our literacy rate is terrible. The unwed mothers are terrible. The rate of citizenry with cancers is tragic. So, like the Joseph Heller novel, something happened. We are a sad case, full of pathos.
That was the way you felt when you first started getting into politics, though, back in '58, wasn't it?
Well, I was a boy when I first got into politics, and the world was romantic, and you could hear off-camera music all the time, and it was a glorious waltz that would just go on and on. Alas, and thank goodness, I grew up, I matured, I put away my boyish dreams, and began to see things as they are on the blue guitar.
Do you have pretty clear memories of what Louisiana politics was like back in the mid-50s?
I have a boy's memories, a young man's memories, and it was, I realize now that I was participating to a great extent in a ritual, an illusion. It was fun, campaigns and barbecues and boucheries, these things that are a part of our folklore and our culture. And television was still in its infancy as a political tool or weapon. There was still the most glorious of all elements, stumping, which meant that the candidate and his entourage, normally even some entertainers, a band, would take out across his state in trucks with sound trucks and buses. There were no vans then, and would go to North Louisiana on a Friday and a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday campaigning. That meant that you pulled up to the front of a courthouse, set up your platform, your microphones, your sound trucks. You had one probably, rode around the town announcing, "Come see so-and-so." The other sound truck, if you were lucky enough to have two, was on to the next town announcing so-and-so is coming. And you would be up in North Louisiana. Then you would take out and hit the Cajun country, South Louisiana, on Sunday. And you might set up in the front of the Catholic Church on Sunday. Now in North Louisiana, you dare not politic on Sunday. That would make you a heretic. But it's quite permissible in South Louisiana, and you'd set up across from the Catholic Church, and when Mass let out, here came people, and here you were set up and ready to go with your message. Then Sunday night, you'd rush to New Orleans and spend a day or two there in that city, which has about a third of our population. You would have a hotel headquarters and begin seeing people and raising money. It was romantic, it was fun, and I was youthful and full of energy and enthusiasm and had all my childish beliefs.
And that kind of campaign doesn't happen anymore?
Or it's been cut down ferociously. Now, if you tried to set up a rally, you would be competing with CNN, wrestling matches on television. You would just have terrible competition that would be almost impossible to overcome. VCRs, somebody would be at home watching, who's the Superman character that Stallone plays? Rocky. Why would they come out and stand in the heat? Why would they leave the air conditioning? You would have very big trouble getting a crowd today.
Are there any politicians around today that even evoke any of those kind of old memories of the way Louisiana politics were back 20, 30 years ago?
Well, there's certainly some politicians living today. As we film this interview, there's some politicians living today who were the men who could draw tremendous crowds, yes. But now active on the campaign trail, in the Cajun country, Governor Edwards can still draw a crowd. Beyond him, I would say no.
When you were growing up, did you ever see Earl Long?
I saw him once at a rally in Ville Platte, Louisiana. It was on some holiday that traditionally opens the campaigning.
Can you describe it by saying that, beginning by saying, I saw Earl Long?
Yeah, I saw Earl Long once or twice. Once in Ville Platte, Louisiana, at a big political rally. And he was unbelievable. He said things that most of us, and never preachers, dare not say even to ourselves. And here it was being said from a podium with great laughter and guffawing and people slapping their blue jean thighs in merriment. He was outrageous. He was a character out of a book, and it was a unique opportunity to see a character step out of a book and be alive and real and in person. He was not an attractive man physically. He had a gravelly voice, and even today there are Louisianians who glory in the ability to imitate Earl Long. I know some men who can do him splendidly. And he would talk so terribly about the opposition. And his usage of the language was marvelous. He was so very creative. He was something. I was too young to really know him or participate in any campaign with him. I was a boy.
About Jimmy Davis, what was he like?
Well, I handled a campaign about Jimmy Davis. I handled a campaign for Jimmy Davis when he ran for governor. And he's a remarkable man. Jimmy Davis was one of the few people I've met in my life who succeeded at everything he ever undertook. That fascinated me, because most of our lives are filled with some few successes and an awful lot of failures. But Davis had succeeded as a musician. He was in both the country and western and the gospel Hall of Fame. And he was not only in them as a songwriter, but he was in them as an entertainer. He'd been governor of his state twice. And he was just something. He had succeeded just in everything that he touched. I found him to be a lovable man. When I knew him, he was getting on in years already. He was also one of the stingiest men I ever met. I used to love to kid him about it. I told him that if he watched the state's money as well as he watched his own, that this state would be handsomely rich. I'll give you an example of Davis' humor and tightness with the dollar, his own. Once Jimmy Davis called me to come over to his house. He said that he was going to be interviewed by a reporter from United Press International. He said, now when this man gets ready to leave, I'm going to give each of you a bag of fresh shelled pecans. Jimmy Davis owned a pecan grove, many pecan groves, I'm sure, in North Louisiana. He said, now when he leaves, you kind of linger behind and you be sure and give me that bag of pecans back. And I said, I will, Governor. He wanted his pecans. And when the reporter left, I hurried out the door. I wanted my pecans. He is a charming man and very lovable. The thing which he placed most emphasis on was loyalty. Loyalty, above all else, loyalty. And he had an interesting bit of phraseology. He said, it's staying by the flag. I had an opportunity to really get to know him when I wrote his biography, which I called an affectionate biography, because it was affectionate. I liked the guy so much that I was not a good political scientist or critic in looking at Jimmy Davis.
You handled his campaign in '71.
Yes, that's right.
Was he, going back to his earlier years, when with the times that he won for governor, was he a flamboyant candidate in any way?
He was a man who his opponents said that Jimmy Davis never said anything. In one of the Louisiana elections, the big issue was our stock law, keeping our livestock fenced in. We were then an agrarian economy. The oil industry had not even begun to rear its head in this state. So the big issue was keeping stock fenced in, livestock. And Bill Dodd, who was later to be lieutenant governor, a dear friend, and perhaps the best political raconteur whom I've ever met, along with Justin Wilson, the humorist. Bill Dodd told me he was campaigning for governor against Jimmy Davis. And he got up and Bill did a dissertation on the whereofs about the stock law, why it was good and bad and so on. And Davis followed him as a speaker. And Davis was accompanied, as always, by his band. And Davis turned to the band and said, "Key of C, boys." And he began to sing, "Don't Fence Me In." And Bill Dodd said the audience just applauded hysterically. And Dodd said he knew at that moment that it would be almost impossible to defeat Jimmy Davis. But time caught up with him too. I remember in the last election riding with him in his van, and he pointed to the woods that we were passing in rural Louisiana, and he said, that's where our vote is. That's where they're going to come out of on election day. But most of those folks had passed on or gotten old. Sadly, even for politicians, the clock does tick.
What about McKeithen?
Brilliant. John McKeithen, a brilliant man. John McKeithen was a product of the Long dynasty. He had been a floor leader for Earl K. Long. And so the good government people, the big newspapers, were very suspicious of John McKeithen, and none supported him in his endeavors to become governor. But when he won, he became, I would say, ferociously good government man who put in our initial code of ethics in Louisiana. And he became he was a really good, clean public servant. He had an interesting combination that I have not seen before him or since him. He had that long Edwards flamboyance, but with it, there was that strain of do right, good government. In other words, he was a kind of an Earl Long if Earl Long had been a preacher.
Why do they call him Big John McKeithen?
Well, he was a great big flamboyant man. That's why he was called Big John McKeithen. And it was pronounced by some as Big John. Phonetically, it would be J-A-W-N, Big John. And he was a Lincoln-esque looking man. Great broad hands, smashed nose from high school fights, I think. And very impressive, imposing man. Big John.
What was his campaign slogan?
His campaign slogan was, "Won't you help me?" Help meaning help, H-E-L-P with the L dropped. And the night that we filmed, the first time I ever heard him use that, he was desperate. He was given no chance to win. The election was drawing to a close. We were cutting television spots in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the state capital. And he ended the spot by saying, "Won't you help me?" So he was exhausted. He really needed help. Proceed.
Let's gotta go put little bars on this first. Maybe 10 seconds.
Actually, I wouldn't mind to start the next thing with that line. 'Cause it's a line I think I could use.
What's that?
How dare anybody in the state be articulate, ruin our reputation. Matter of fact, that would also lead to something that would be very useful in terms of the subject that I want to get into, in terms of the reputation of the state.
We're running.
Well, can you start with that line one more time?
I hope, as this interview has proceeded, that you'll forgive my introspection. How dare anybody from Louisiana be either introspective or articulate? It would ruin a hard-fought-for reputation.
Why is Louisiana politics perceived to be so different?
I don't know. Louisiana politics is probably perceived to be different because our state is so different. We inhabit here the darndest melting pot of almost any other state, and our politics is a reflection of it. At the top of the state map, you would have North Louisiana, which is Protestant and much more laid back, much more somber, straight-laced, it might be called. Then you hit South Louisiana, which is best symbolized by the phrase, "Le beau temps roule," let the good times roll. It's our wonderful, warm, Acadian people who are full of life and a love of life. And that's a clash of two cultures. Then 1/3 of us are black, which is a wholly different culture. Then you go to New Orleans, and that's a great metropolitan city, probably along with New York and San Francisco, among the more sophisticated cities in the nation. So this hodgepodge, this, if you'll excuse me, this gumbo of all of these ingredients are almost a concoction of a mad scientist, and it was bound to have produced something unique.
Describe that uniqueness. I mean, what kind of uniqueness is it specifically in politics?
Scalawags, our uniqueness, well, scalawags don't make us angry. They amuse us. They entertain us. And we come to love them. And sometimes in politics, we come to keep them around. They afford us hours of discussion. The day after a campaign ends, Louisianians will begin discussing the next campaign and the future candidates, who looked good, who's finished forever. It's our national pastime, politics. Probably second here only to LSU football. Our indignation gland, someplace along the way, was sorely damaged, stymied. It no longer functions. Things which would send other people into rage at some occurrence does not seem to affect us that way. The important thing is that we be amused and entertained. And as we've laughed, we have proceeded on a rather sad journey that to a great extent has been downhill.
Is the system a product of Huey Long in any way?
Is the system a product of Huey Long? Well, he began it. And when he came along, he was necessary, absolutely. You had a few giant industries who controlled everything. There were no free textbooks, no paved highways. And he came along and our first populist governor. And I think he did great contributions for this state. I think he brought everybody into the game and not just the large companies who were down here because of our oil. So I think he was necessary. Now that at certain times in his life, he obviously became a tyrant and allowed certain peoples to become multimillionaires and their fortunes to endure even today. That didn't do the citizenry very good. But at least we got something, and it was a new thing. It was a new experience for Louisianians. We weren't left out of the poker game. We were dealt an occasional chip.
You know, there's some people that say that what Huey wrought on the state ruined the state for the last 40 years.
I don't think that Huey Long ruined this state. I think that he gave the poor and the generally unnoticed and unrepresented an opportunity to finally get a little something out of their labors and their government. Then a lot of people criticized Huey Long because a lot of people didn't want other people to get a piece of the action. He took a tremendous criticism for that.
There are a lot of folks that we're talking to around the state now that say that the problem with the state is that it's too many uneducated, illiterate people that have too much of an influence in politics.
I don't know about the influence of the uneducated and the illiterate among us. They are a fact of life.
Is that part of the same thing you're talking about? You know, people that didn't want people to have part of the action? Complaining about people they don't consider to be educated politically?
Well, I don't know whether or not we resent people because we don't want them to have a part of the action. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Where does Edwin fit into all this?
Edwin Edwards is, of course, the most successful politician in the history of this state, and I guess maybe in the nation. Here's a man who, as we filmed this interview, has never been defeated for public office. He's run at every level, local in Crowley, Louisiana, I think on the town council. He then was a state senator, a United States congressman, and then governor over and over and over. Nobody else has ever done that. So he's a unique man. He is a brilliant man with a spectacular sense of humor, probably the quickest I've ever seen. We've never had anybody quite like him. He has a good Protestant name, Edwards, but is in fact a Catholic with a ferocious Cajun accent. He's a handsome man. He's a wonderful speaker. He's been a unique phenomenon in our midst. I know of no one on the horizon who will replace him in that very colorful way. Now, maybe that's for the good, I don't know.
Is he almost like a true representation of the gumbo pot of Louisiana?
He is, in fact, yes, a representation of the gumbo pot of Louisiana, because there is that Protestant name, Edwards, that North Louisiana name, and then that very Cajun demeanor, accent. So yes, he is.
Do you see him as many people have said, he's the heir apparent to the Longs, just in the way in which they operate in state politics?
I think it could be said that in many ways Edwards is the heir apparent of the Populist. For example, Longism. For example, in the election that is taking place now as we tape this spot. Hold on.
Excuse me. Okay, can we just try that one again?
Yeah, you'll have to ask me the question.
Okay,
Yeah.
you want to ask a question?
No, go for it.
Okay. Do you find that Edwards is the heir apparent to the Long dynasty in the way in state politics?
In many ways, Edwards is the heir apparent of the Long tradition, way of doing government. In the campaign which is now going on as we film this interview, for example, Edwards is making virtually no use of the media in this campaign. Virtually no money spent on, for example, political advertising, which is normally where most of your money goes. And he's doing it because he knows that media is of very little value to him. His vote is the black vote, the blue-collar vote, hopefully the Cajun vote. And he knows where his vote is, and he's going to go after them, getting them out to vote on election day. And it just ties in because the populace knows where the populist vote is, and that is absolutely what he's concentrating on.
Just to follow up on that, there is sort of a, as you were talking about the gland in Louisiana politics, the gland of indignation that is somehow atrophied. In response to Edwin Edwards, he also fits into that tradition, does he not? Of you take a little bit and people just sort of look aside. It's okay, and we don't mind our politicians kind of playing around a little bit, so long as everybody gets a little piece of change as well.
I couldn't say that. I couldn't say that. I know that's not the answer for the game, but I couldn't say that and wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think he fits into that tradition?
What do you think the people that look up to him, have supported him in the past, what do you think they see when they see him?
What do the people who support Edwards see?
Yeah, what do they see when they see him?
He's not a mean man. If you are against him in an election, vengeance is not going to be wreaked upon you. He's not a mean man at all. He's a very kind man. He's a man who's ferociously loyal to his friends, and perhaps that is one of the things that has hurt him, because sometimes friends will make demands of you. I once heard a governor say of a friend, "I'm prepared to go right up to the gates of Angola for him." I think Edwards has done that on many occasions, and I think that it's gotten him in terrible trouble. But here's the thing about politics. You're running for governor. It's a desperate situation in which you're kowtowing to people, catering to people, begging for money. It's really a brutish occupation, this business of running for governor. And here's a scalawag. Let's just call this person a scalawag. And they say, I'm with you and I'm going to support you. Well, in the heat of battle, that scalawag looks awfully good. You're glad to have his support. You're not interested in his forebears, his prison record, or anything else. You want some money if he's got it. You want his family to vote for you and his friends. He's your scalawag. Lo and behold, you win. Here comes the scalawag. He now wants his reward. So what do? And all of a sudden, everyone is now making these very critical judgments on the scalawag. Now we're recalling his forebears and his prison record and putting him under the sharpest light, investigative light. But he wants a job and he helped you. Or he wants you to call so-and-so for him. Or get such and such signed for him. Or get somebody out of Angola. And he's got a terrible hold on you. He helped you when you were down and desperate. Politicians are human beings, and sometimes they succumb to those pressures. And sometimes it gets them in an awful lot of trouble.
What do you think is going to happen in this race?
Well, the most fascinating thing about this race is that neither I nor anybody else can really say. The polls have been wildly different. And I'm talking about polls taken within a day or two of each other. It's almost like they were taken on different planets. So they haven't really given us an indices of how this thing will turn out, this election. Any one of the leading candidates could end up in the second primary. Any one of them. And I think that anybody who made a firm prediction today that so-and-so and so-and-so are going to be in the runoff is just as crazy as he can be, or delusional or hopeful. It could be any one of the candidates.
What about with Edwards, though? What do you think is going to happen in terms of the election?
I think it could be any one of the candidates. In other words, I'm not certain that Edwards is going to be one of the winners. I'm not certain of that. Nor do I think necessarily that he would not make it. But that's the interesting point. I, who have been observing and participating in this process for 30 years, would not be in a position to even hazard a guess about who would end up in the second primary.
Ultimately, can Edwards win this election?
I don't know if Edwards can win or not. He, like anyone who has inhabited office for a long time, has picked up some ferocious scars. And it's so easy to pick up scars in politics. For example, to the uninitiated, to the layman, nothing must look as glorious as patronage, that almighty power to give jobs to people. Well, the politician would tell you that nothing is a greater nightmare than patronage. You give John Doe a job, and John Doe and his family love you. They put your picture in their home over the mantelpiece. They invite you to their child's christening. But the other 50 people who wanted the job are now your mortal enemy. And if they could, they and their families would stick pins in dolls made in your image. So politics is patronage is a terrible ball that you juggle, and it constantly explodes, and each one of these explosions takes so much out of your hide. And Edwards has a record to run on. He has also been a victim of our declining oil industry. This state where the money just rolled in for every frivolous, sometimes ridiculous endeavor, now finds itself with monumental debt. And he's a victim of that, for which he is not responsible, let me quickly say. So he's got a record to run on, and he's got minus signs that he's accumulated along the way, some very heavy baggage. And so I think he'll have a pretty tough time. Could he win it? Were he a racehorse, you would be crazy not to bet on him. Because remember, in the 16 or 17 races that he has run, he has never lost.
Let's assume he loses. Write me a brief but introspective epitaph for Edwin as a politician in Louisiana.
An epitaph for Edward, should he lose, you're asking me. a legend created in our times. Usually legends have happened before we were born. But here's been an opportunity for us now to observe the making of a legend. A very brilliant man, and I would say a man with some very serious flaws. Very serious flaws.
Do you think that if he loses, it will be the end of a certain kind of populist tradition in Louisiana politics?
Would Edwards' defeat be the end of populist politics in Louisiana? I don't think that would be the end of it. Somebody would come along.
I would, if somebody came along, rather. I don't think that Edwards' defeat will be the end of it.
Okay.
You could say it that way.
I don't think that Edwards' defeat would be the end of populist politics in Louisiana. We're a cycle. We're turning constantly. Good government, populist. Good government, populist. If a good government man wins, I can almost definitely predict that a majority of our citizenry will be completely bored with him and disenchanted with him 2 years after he's in office, and will be looking for some quotation mark character, close quotation mark. And one will come along. Even as we're filming this, new populists are being bred someplace in North Louisiana or on the bayous or in the French Quarter.
Did you work for Edwin at some point?
I did. I handled one of his campaigns for governor. What kind of a man was he to work for? He runs the show. I was most successful in writing some speeches for him. He did that. He utilized me very much in that way. But, for example, you would go in to film a television spot, and he'd say, "What do you want?" And you'd say, "Well, we ought to have a spot on such and such and such and such." He says, "How long do I have?" And you'd say, 28 seconds. And he says, "Let's go." You click on the camera, and he would give you a pretty good television spot that ran 28 seconds. In other words, he's a consummate pro.
This is back in '75.
Yes, I think so. The dates are almost meaningless to me. It's all kind of melded in my, it's probably old, just the first signs of senility, more to come. Be patient.
Let me ask for 2 short stories, and I'll bow out of this.
I'm going to change the tape.
Okay.
I'm not sure it'll leave anything. I grew up anything on it. Don't think so?
Yeah, no, let's do it. Sure, let's try it.
But after that, I'm done. So you've got things you want to ask.
Not really.
2 quick stories. Can you give me a story, brief story, that would be a good characterization of Edwin Edwards?
No.
Okay.
No, I can't think of anything that would, Gravel can give you that backwards and forwards. I couldn't give you that.
How about a quick or brief story that would characterize Louisiana politics?
Well, the most famous story that I guess that characterizes Louisiana politics is when LSU had a big football game and Ringling Brothers insisted on coming into the state and having a performance the day of the LSU game. And Governor Huey Long asked them please not to come. But they said, "No, we've got it booked and we're going to be there." So Huey, who was obviously a very bright lawyer, said that Louisiana's dipping law would have to carefully be observed. Now, a dipping law was to prevent disease from being brought in by animals from out of state. And this meant that Ringling Brothers was going to have to do such things as dip 50 elephants, lions, tigers, rhinoceros, llamas, camels, etc. So they did change their performance date not to interfere with the LSU football game.
Do you think, we've been talking about this whole thing about politics here being different, Louisiana being unique. Is politics really that different in Louisiana than it is in other parts of the United States?
Well, I don't think politics in Louisiana is that different than other places. For example, we think we're the baddest, if I can use that word. But then you look at New York, where virtually the entire municipal hierarchy, with some exceptions, has crumbled because of skullduggery. And we're not quite in their league. And almost, it's so interesting to me when I foray out of this state, go to other states and read the local newspapers, they've always got some scandal going. Somebody got caught doing something, some United States attorney indicting somebody. So I don't think that we're any worse than anyone. I think that our sin is we had more to squander than most, and I think we have almost methodically done so. So that we who should and have been the leader in virtually all fields of endeavor because of our resources and the spirit of our people, find ourselves in last place in virtually everything that is meaningful. And that is the tragedy of Louisiana. As I said, the Joseph Heller book, Something Happened, it sure did.
Is it just then that we're not so much more corrupt, we're just more colorful?
I don't think we're any more corrupt than anyone else. I think that we have a penchant, though, for smiling at it. We will excuse and forgive an awful lot. So if you could put a state, if you had to choose a state to put on the other side of the confessional, you'd sure choose Louisiana, because chances are you would be forgiven. On the other hand, somebody else might call it compassion. But when you see the condition that this state is in now, compassion and all these other rationales, they won't cut it. That's not enough.
One sentence, starting with Louisiana politics, is?
Louisiana politics is a Greek tragedy. And the state is the victim.
Andy?
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all gonna hear me cussing all the way from
We